is Worldview, and thank you for joining us. Now, the past few months have been rather unstable for South African government. The Gupta scandal, the Concord ruling, the firing and hiring of the finance minister's portfolio, and all the drama in Parliament. So the EFF said on Wednesday that it had received confirmation from Speaker of Parliament, Lekota, that Parliament will consider taking disciplinary action against Jacob Zuma. EFF Chief Whip Floyd Shivambu wrote to Mbete demanding a disciplinary action against Zuma following the Constitutional Court judgment that he violated the Constitution. National Assembly Speaker Mbete met party leaders behind closed doors to discuss the implications of the Nkandla ruling. Meanwhile, the South African economy has also taken a beating over the past decade. At least 25% of the nation remains unemployed, and the economy grew by 1.4% in 2014. In the first week of December, credit rating agency Fitch said rising government debt, weak economic growth, and lowered business confidence had pushed the country to one level below junk status. Fitch also predicted the economy is likely to grow by a paltry 1.7% in 2016. So today on Worldview, I am joined by the COPE founder and leader, Ms. Lekota, who is here to tell us more about what exactly is happening in the South African government, in the South African political terrain, and what is the way forward. Good evening, and thank you for joining us.
Good evening, and good evening to the listeners.
Well, like I clearly said in my introduction, that in the past few months, South Africa has really seen a whole lot of instability coming from the government side. We also had you, during the State of the Nation address, something that we actually haven't really seen before, walking out on President Zuma before he actually delivered his speech. A lot of political parties, opposition political parties, that is, expressing their dissatisfaction in President Zuma's administration. Now, there's been a lot of frustration over those past few months in the country after the firing of the finance minister, the rehiring and the hiring of the finance minister, the Concord, amongst others. What do you make out of all this?
I think all the things that you are referring to, the problems that you are identifying, are symptoms of a very fundamental weakness or problem. Is the problem of a country with an excellent constitution, but governed by men and women who have no appreciation of the fact that this is a constitutional democracy in which the constitution reigns supreme and not a majoritarianism. It doesn't matter how much a majority you may have, if that majority is not consistent with the Constitution, which is what the position is here, it is meaningless, it is irrelevant, and necessarily everything it does is in conflict with the rule of law. That really is the problem. And so, and of course, the fact of the matter is that the current president has told, well, he first told me, the first time I myself heard him say this, was when he said that the ANC is above the Constitution. Since then, he has repeated this.
Did he actually say this publicly, that the ANC is above the Constitution?
Or? Oh, yes. He said it times without number, actually. He told me that he was in the Free State. He has since repeated that in Durban at some point after that. He repeated that in Lusikisiki. Around the time when President Thabo Mbeki was recalled, he's acted this way. You can imagine a president in whose country the Constitution says the police will be a service to the citizens. He announced sometime shortly after he became president that the police would be a police force. He didn't ask to change the Constitution. I don't even think he worried to look what the Constitution says. And he then went on he said it was going to be a police service. And his commissioner announced that the police would shoot to kill. He was never rebuked. His deputy minister said the same thing. And strangely, all of those things were being said when Section 11 of our Constitution says every citizen, everybody has a right to life. We are not, the courts of our country may not sentence anybody to death, but the president and his cabinet say these things, and he doesn't rebuke them. He just let it go on like this. Consequently, when Andries Tatane and his community in Vicksburg went to protest their need or their failure to get water and electricity, he was shot dead by the police, daylight, something that we never thought.
And he had not actually committed any offense, had
No
he?
offense. He had committed no offense. He was going with the other people. He was one of the leading citizens demanding water, demanding electricity. Similarly, in Marikana, the workers that were demanding better salaries and all of that, etc., were mowed down, Sharpeville style. In spite of that clause in the Constitution, everybody has a right to life. Then in Mututlong is another community protesting lack of water, electricity. They got mowed down as well. So now, killing people in this country, in spite of the provisions of the Constitution, under this administration, I say underline, under this administration, has become a daily affair. The police shoot and that, kill people and so on. It's nobody, I mean, we scream as much as we like in Parliament about the provisions of the Constitution.
But nothing is done.
Nothing happens.
Is done. Now, the calls for Zuma to step down have been mounting, obviously outside from the opposition parties. But news lately that even within the ANC itself, there are people calling for the president to step down. Is this true?
Oh, this is very, very true. In fact, you have to think, apart from the fact that the Constitution has been undermined in the manner that I've just been saying, you have to think that when the issue of Nkandla came up, the issue really was, our Constitution provides for the public protector. So if we feel that a certain abuse has been carried out, we may approach the public protector, which is an independent institution, democracy supporting. Now, once the public protector has investigated whatever complaint it is, and finds that there is transgression, and makes a determination, remedial action that should be taken, that must be implemented. Again, the president and his executive have consistently, on a number of separate occasions, just refused to do so. The thing that has increased this thing to this level of crescendo now is because ultimately this matter was taken to the Concord, our apex court.
Yes, we have a clip actually showing that,
Yes.
the Concord ruling and all that.
The ruling of the Concord was that the president was duty bound to implement those remedial action steps that the public protector put forward. A very really significant thing was that the president and his caucus essentially second-guessed the judgment of the Concord. They interpreted it as it suits them and said, in fact, the Concord has not said the president did anything wrong, and they themselves just go on this way. This was now the climax, I think, because if the executive, led by the president, can disregard the judgment of the judiciary,
there's obviously a big challenge there.
it's a
there's
huge,
a problem.
and the National Assembly, which is our legislature.
So now that we have a division within the ANC, does this mean that there are any high chances of the president actually being impeached? Is it possible? Can that be a reality? Or are we still looking, knocking on a brick wall that will never fall?
Well, the people of our country will have to take some decision whether there will be a lawless society, because what this whole situation means is that President Zuma and his executive and his party have now overthrown the constitution. So they will, if they are allowed to go on like this, it means they will govern South Africa according to their wishes.
For the next 60 years. Now, there's a lot of frustration, though, among the South African youths over the progress of transformation in the country. They say it's slow. They don't seem to be benefiting. Hence, they don't even see the reason why they should vote for the ANC and perhaps for any other political party, that is. With some saying the ANC is not in touch with the young South Africans. Do you feel that your party, perhaps, which is the COPE, has addressed this issue better than the ANC has actually done over the past few years?
Well, look, the Congress of the People is a post-democracy political party, and we set it up on the slogan, in defense of the Constitution. We have been very consistent about the fact that the African National Congress and all of us, political parties variously, have no choice but to follow the Constitution. And unless we do that, there's not a future for the people of our country. Mm-hmm. There will be turmoil, because if the president does as he wishes, those who don't agree with him will also do as they please. I have said as much in Parliament, that the refusal to obey the Constitution, to uphold it, to advance it, is dumping our society in an anarchy. The president does as he pleases, kills people when he kills people, send the police to do these things. We are going back to the days of apartheid, where the Afrikaners didn't care what the views and feeling of the people of our country was, because they were black in color, and just shot them variously. But this gentleman is taking us in the same direction. And there will be protests. I promise you, there will be protests. There's already a rebellion inside the ANC ranks. But the ANC is not a political party. That's another thing. It's a liberation movement. And people there have not been
What is
schooled.
the difference between a liberation movement
Well,
and a political party?
a liberation movement is an organization that was set to bring about democracy. And it could pursue methods that it felt it could pursue. But a political party, which has sworn allegiance to a constitution, is an organization that can only come to power if it is voted for by a politically educated majority that understand what it wants. And I'm sure the people of this country are still going to turn against the ANC, because when people begin to see the consequences, as they are going to escalate, of killing people, the hunger, joblessness, all of that, they're going to protest against the ANC itself. And the ANC will then use all this instrument of state to slaughter them.
There has been a lot of pessimism, a lot of talk of South Africa losing its way in the media, especially with all this back and forth in what is happening in Parliament, in the government, the President's administration. Is this the actual case?
We are seeing increasingly the attacks on the judges, on the courts. I mean, only after this judgment of the Concord, the President called a meeting of the traditional leaders and told them that we must not listen to the courts. It was a public statement. We must not listen to the courts because the courts are using some Western things. We must use our African way in dealing with our problems. Whatever that African means, I'm an African. I don't know any African way that says we can lie, we can violate our oath of office. I know of no such culture. But he is agitating leaders of society to refuse to obey the Constitution. This is the man who took the oath of office. So it's turmoil it's a breakdown of law and order by the people who are supposed to be leading society in the direction, the only direction that President Nelson Mandela signed and left us a legacy of running national issues, state affairs in a manner that will place our country on a plane in which it will be peaceful, in which the people will be united, and in which the rule of law will reign supreme. But he's destroying it.
The ANC people, though, argue the fact that even former President Mandela and former President Thabo Mbeki also had to face the Concord at some point, but it didn't mean that they had to be impeached. Can you actually compare what happened to the two former presidents and what is actually happening with President Jacob Zuma now? Is it something that is comparable?
These things that I'm talking about never ever happened under President Mandela. They never ever happened under President Thabo Mbeki. I was a minister there in President Thabo Mbeki's 10 years of governing. We never at any time violated the Constitution. This thing that this president of the moment is doing is unique to himself and those around him. It's a new thing. It's completely contrary to the Constitution of our country. President Mandela would never have allowed this thing. And President Mbeki is a great advocate of the Constitution of this country. And I remember that even when we traveled in Southern Africa, he often sought to persuade fellow presidents of the region to say we must respect the constitutions of our countries, because it's the only way that we can render peaceful the region of Southern Africa. And up north, because I was the Minister of Defense, where we went to try and stem out the conflicts that had come from the Cold War years. His singular passion was to persuade them to say, please, if only we respect the constitutions of our country to start with, that's the most reliable foundation from which we can then expand. First of all, the reign of peace. Secondly, create stability in which the economy can then thrive, and in which suffering of human beings will then subside. And all of the positive things. Education. You can't educate children in a society that is at war with itself.
True.
Schools are disrupted and all of this.
Yes, Mr. Lekota, sir, do the mechanisms still exist in the government for difficult issues to be actually openly raised, or have the spaces for criticism been suppressed in the ANC of today?
Look, I know that there are those in the membership and leadership of the ANC who feel that President Zuma must be the beginning and the end of everything. But I must tell you that I have observed in the recent period increasing numbers of men and women who are standing up to be counted, who are saying, no, this is not the freedom for which we fought.
Political maturity, perhaps they're showing more political maturity as before, where it seemed maybe people might not have quite understood where exactly they were going. But now people really get the bigger picture. They know exactly what they want. They can choose what they want. They can go for what they want.
Well, look, I'm not talking about youngsters that are growing. I'm talking about men and women in the first place who were front rankers in the struggle against apartheid, some of whom were part of the drafting of the Freedom Charter in 1955 in Kliptown. These are people who kept thinking that perhaps this thing will get arrested. It will get arrested. But I think they are now seeing that there is no getting arrested, that President Zuma is driving in a direction that absolutely want lawlessness. I say that bluntly like that because really not to respect the Constitution, to call on leaders of society, to despise church leaders who say, please, let's return to civilized ways, to call upon traditional leaders to defy the cause of the country. What is this kind of thing is is exactly what has happened in a number of dictatorships that previously have disrupted
We
peace.
see that in other African countries, in actual fact. We did speak about it earlier before the show started, that even other neighboring African countries, it seems a way of culture for African leaders to have some sort of an authoritarian type of rule over the people. So having said that, where is South Africa headed? The economy is in a poor shape, if we must say. The mining sector is shedding jobs. Are we staring down an empty barrel? Are we going anywhere forward?
Well, at this stage, I continue to harbor the hope that those of us who understand and recognize now the real danger of our country being dumped in a bloodbath or anarchy in which South Africans will eat each other up, I still harbor the hope that more sensible, discerning members of our society will not only just rise up, but that they will mobilize and they will plead with the rest of society to see this danger that is coming and to put a stop to it. In the end, South Africans may well have to put their life and limb as barricades.
But do you think the economy will improve at some point?
Well, the point I'm making is, I don't think he even cares about the economy. I honestly don't think so. If you look at the depth of the debt he has put our country in, we are now way beyond where we were when we started with government. Our national debt has shot. We are only addressing now interest on debt. And if it goes on at the sluggish way that the economy is going, growth is simply not there. The unemployment is huge. And we've got a government of 73 or so ministers and deputy ministers. Public funds are just for consumption. And he needs all these hangers on around him, who therefore feel that parliament and vote for him to keep him. He's only about himself and his family. So in this way and in that way, we can only really go deeper and deeper in the quicksand of poverty, squalor, no employment, and then of course nobody will come and invest in a country. However much it is, that is losing the resources of the country, wasting them the way it is doing.
Now, we've only literally got 3 minutes to close the show. Any final remarks to people watching? What are we expecting from COPE this year? We have the upcoming municipal elections in the next month or two or so. What are we expecting? What is the way forward?
Well, we are doing our best to consult with other opposition parties. We're talking to South Africans in opposition and not in opposition, in the churches, in business, in every walk of life. South Africans must stand up. They must voice their views on this matter.
What is their response?
Well, I think there's a very positive response coming up. This Saturday, for instance, civil society formations, plus the opposition parties in parliament, and they will, business people and all of that, will be meeting to consult on how to ensure that our voice is heard. Members of the African National Congress, leaders of regions and provinces are beginning to break rank because they realize that they have a responsibility to future generations to preserve, to protect this constitution, to stop the ANC, to stop President Zuma in what he's trying to do, and to revert back and return the constitution to the center of controlling and directing the affairs of our nation through men and women, wherever they may come from, but who are singularly committed to the constitution of our country.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lekota, for coming and sharing those thoughts with us, and all the best in the upcoming elections.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's all we have time for this evening. Thank you for watching. Do join us again next week as we bring you more updates on the world, current affairs. Thank you for watching.